There's a moment every October that decides whether your bees live or die, and most beekeepers walk right past it. They close up the hive for winter, feeling pretty good about themselves. The boxes are heavy, the bees are flying, everything looks fine. And then in February, when they finally lift that lid on a warm afternoon, they find a cluster the size of a softball, dead, frozen in place, heads buried in empty cells. Starved, they think. Or maybe the cold got them. But it wasn't the cold, and it usually wasn't starvation either. That colony was already doomed back in October, and there was a test. A simple test that cost you about $1 in materials, that would have told you the truth while you still had time to fix it. I'm talking about the sugar roll test, or its close cousin, the alcohol wash, for measuring the mite load in your hive. And I'll be honest with you right up front. This is the single most important thing you can do for your bees in late summer and fall. And it's the thing I see beekeepers skip more than anything else. Year after year, good, caring people who love their bees, who spend hundreds of dollars on equipment and feed, who read every book, and they won't spend 20 minutes and $1's worth of powdered sugar to actually count the mites that are killing their colony. Let me show you how to do this right. And let me tell you why it matters so much. Because once you understand what's actually happening inside that hive, you'll never skip it again. Here's the hard truth. The #1 killer of honeybee colonies in this country is not the cold. It's not bears. It's not even starvation. Starvation, though starvation gets the blame. It's a tiny reddish-brown mite, about the size of a pinhead, called varroa destructor. And that name, destructor, is not an exaggeration. Whoever named that mite knew exactly what it does. Varroa arrived in the United States in 1987. Before that, beekeeping in America was a very different thing. You could put bees in a box, mostly leave them alone, and they'd take care of themselves for years. Old-timers will tell you about it, and they're not lying. And they're not just being nostalgic. It really was easier, but that world is gone, and it's not coming back. Since that mite showed up, if you keep bees and you do nothing about varroa, your colony will almost certainly die. Not might. Will. Usually within a year or two. So let me explain what this mite actually does, because you can't manage what you don't understand. The varroa mite is a parasite. Think of it like a tick, but scaled to a bee's world. A tick on a dog is a nuisance, but imagine a tick the size of a dinner plate riding on your back, feeding on you, and you start to get a sense of the proportion here. That's roughly what a varroa mite is to a honeybee. For a long time, we believed the mite fed on the bee's blood, the hemolymph. That's what I was taught. And it's what a lot of the older books still say. But the research has moved on, and I want to give you the accurate picture. Work published in 2019 by Samuel Ramsey and his colleagues showed that varroa mites actually feed primarily on the bee's fat body, an organ that works a little like our liver. That fat body handles the bee's immune function, its ability to store nutrients, and its ability to survive the winter. So when the mite feeds, it isn't just taking a little something off the top. It's eating the very organ the bee needs to get through the cold months. Now hold on to that, because that's the whole reason this test matters for winter survival specifically. Here's how the mite breeds, and this is the clever, awful part. A female mite slips into a brood cell just before the workers cap it over. She prefers drone brood, but she'll take worker brood too. She hides down in the bottom of the cell, under the larva, in the pool of food. The cell gets capped, and while that young bee is developing in the dark, sealed away, the mite feeds on it and lays her eggs. Her offspring mate with each other right there in the cell. And when that new bee finally chews its way out, several mated female mites climb out with it, ready to find the next cell and do it all over again. Do the math on that, and it'll frighten you. A varroa population can roughly double every month during the season. So, a hive that has a handful of mites in May, a level you'd never notice, where every bee looks perfect, can have a crushing, colony-ending infestation by September. And the tragedy, the real tragedy, is that it happens invisibly. Right when your colony is at its strongest, right when you're feeling proudest of that big, beautiful population, the mites are peaking too. And here's the part that catches so many people. The mite doesn't just weaken the bee by feeding. It's a syringe. Every time it feeds, it injects viruses straight into the bee's body. The worst of these is deformed wing virus. You've probably seen it and not known what you were looking at. A bee crawling around the entrance with crumpled, useless little wings, never able to fly. When you see that bee, Understand what it's telling you. That is not an isolated problem. That is a smoke alarm going off. That bee is telling you the mite load in your hive is already high and the viruses are already circulating. So now let's talk about why this all comes to a head in winter, because this is the whole point. A summer bee lives about 6 weeks. She works herself to death, and that's normal. But the bees your colony raises in the fall, the ones born in September and October, those are different. They're called winter bees or diutinous bees, and they're built to live for months, not weeks. They're the bees that huddle together in the cluster, shivering their flight muscles to make heat, keeping the whole colony alive through January and February until the queen starts laying again. Those winter bees are your colony's lifeboat. Everything depends on them. And what do they need to become long-lived winter bees? A healthy, well-developed fat body, the exact organ the varroa mite eats. Do you see the trap now? If your mite levels are high in the fall, right when those precious winter bees are being raised, the mites are feeding on the very bees that are supposed to carry the colony through to spring. Those bees come out already damaged, already carrying virus, already short on the reserves they need. They look fine in October. The cluster looks fine, but it's a lifeboat with holes drilled in the bottom and you can't see them. Then the cold sets in, the bees start dying faster than a winter cluster should lose them. The cluster shrinks, and somewhere in the deep cold, it gets too small to keep itself warm, and it dies. Not from cold, from mites, months earlier, in the fall, when you still could have done something. That's why counting your mites in late summer and early fall isn't optional. It's the whole ball game. If you get your mite levels down before those winter bees are raised, you give the colony a real chance. If you don't, all the honey and all the good insulation in the world won't save them. So here is the test. And I promise you, it is simple. Anyone can do this. You do not need to be an expert, and you do not need fancy equipment. The gold standard for accuracy is the alcohol wash. But let me start with the sugar roll, because a lot of folks don't like the idea of killing a sample of their own bees, and I understand that completely. The sugar roll doesn't harm them. Here's what you need: a wide-mouth glass jar like a canning jar, a lid ring, and instead of the flat metal lid, you use a piece of No. 8 hardware cloth, that screen with 1/8-inch holes, big enough for a mite to fall through, but too small for a bee to escape. You cut a circle of that screen to fit under the ring. You'll want some powdered sugar, right as CEZ tartar, the regular confectioner's sugar from the grocery store, a white bowl or a white plate, a little water, and a measuring device. A half-cup scoop is what most people use, because a level half cup of bees is right around 300 bees. That number matters, so hold on to it. Now, where do you take your sample from? This is where people go wrong, so listen close. You want nurse bees because that's where the mites tend to be, down on the brood. So you go to a frame of open brood in the center of the brood nest. But first, and this is critical, you find the queen and you make absolutely sure she is not on that frame. You do not want to shake your queen into a jar of sugar. Once you've confirmed she's somewhere else, you take that frame of brood-covered bees and you give it a firm shake into a plastic tub or a large bowl. The bees tumble down into a pile. Then you scoop your half cup of those bees and pour them into the jar. Screw on the ring with the screen. Now, through the screen, you spoon in about 2 good tablespoons of powdered sugar. You give the jar a gentle roll to coat all the bees, and then you set it aside in the shade for a couple of minutes. What's happening in there is the sugar is coating the bees and it's coating the mites, and it makes the mites lose their grip. The powdered sugar also gets the bees grooming, which knocks even more mites loose. After a couple of minutes, you hold the jar over that white bowl or plate and you shake it, screen side down, for a good 30 seconds or so. Really shake it. The powdered sugar and the mites rain down through the screen onto the white surface. The white is so you can see the mites, little reddish-brown ovals in the white sugar. Now, if the sugar's clumpy and you can't tell what's a mite and what's a lump, pour a little water over it. The sugar dissolves and the mites float, plain as day, and you count them. And then, this is the nice part, you tip your sugar-covered bees back out in front of the hive or right into the top of the box, and their sisters clean them off and they walk right back in, no harm done. The alcohol wash is the same idea, but instead of powdered sugar, you use rubbing alcohol or windshield washer fluid or even soapy water. It kills that sample of 300 bees. And I won't pretend otherwise. You're sacrificing about 300 bees. But here's the thing you need to hear, and I say it as someone who hated the idea for years. The alcohol wash is more accurate. It knocks loose nearly every mite, where the sugar roll on a good day gets you maybe 70% of them. 300 bees is a tiny fraction of a colony of 40 or 50,000. And if the count you get talks you into treating a hive that would otherwise have died over the winter, all 40,000 of them, then those 300 bees bought the lives of the whole colony. That's the trade. Once I made peace with that math, I switched, and I've never regretted it. Whichever method you use, the math to interpret it is the same, and it's easy. You sampled about 300 bees, so take the number of mites you counted and figure out the percentage. 3 mites out of 300 bees is 1%. 9 mites is 3%. 18 mites is 6%. Now, what's the number that matters? Here's the guidance the researchers and extension services give us, and it's solid. Going into fall, you want your mite load below about 2%. That's below 3 mites in your sample. If you're getting 3%, that's your action threshold. That's the alarm bell. At 3% in late summer, you need to treat. And you need to treat soon, because the population is climbing, and those winter bees are being raised right now. If you're seeing 5 or 6% or higher in the fall, I'll be straight with you. That colony is in serious trouble, and without immediate treatment, it very likely will not see spring. I want to stop right here and tell you a story, because I don't want this to be all numbers. Years back, I had a colony I was proud of. Strongest hive in the yard. Huge population boiling over with bees. Brought in more honey than any other hive I had that year. I looked at that hive in September and I thought, that one's bulletproof. That one doesn't need anything. So I tested my weaker hives and I skipped that big one. Didn't seem worth the 20 minutes. It looked too good to be sick. That was exactly backwards, and I know that now. A big strong colony with lots of brood is a mite factory. All that brood is cradle after cradle for the mites to breed in. By the time I got around to looking hard, in November, that beautiful hive was hollow. The population had collapsed, and by January it was dead. A little cluster, frozen, with honey just inches away that they were too weak and too few to reach. I lost my best colony that year because I trusted my eyes instead of a $1 test. So, let me save you from that. Your eyes will lie to you about mites. The bees can look perfect right up until the end. The only way to know the truth is to count. Test your strongest hives, not just your weak ones, especially your strongest hives. Now let me be honest with you about the limits and the mistakes, because I'd be doing you no favors pretending this is all simple and settled. First mistake, testing too late. If you wait until you're closing up for winter to do your first mite count, you've missed the window. Those winter bees are already raised or being raised. You want to be testing through the summer and hitting it hard in August, so that when the colony makes its winter bees in September and October, it's making them in a clean, low mite hive. The old rule of thumb some folks use is to have your mites knocked down by around Labor Day. And that's not a bad target for much of the country. Adjust it for your own climate. If you're way down south, your timing shifts. Second mistake, testing once and thinking you're done. Mite populations climb all season, and they can also come roaring back after a treatment, sometimes from mites drifting in on bees from a neighbor's collapsing, untreated hive. That's called a mite bomb, and it's real. So one clean test in July does not mean you're safe in September. Test again. I'd say monthly through the danger season isn't too often. Third mistake, and this one I feel strongly about, the sticky board alone. Some folks slide a sticky board under a screened bottom board, count the mites that fall naturally over a few days, and call it a mite count. Now, a sticky board can tell you something, but the natural mite drop is a very rough, unreliable measure, and it tends to make your problem look smaller than it is. I've watched people get a low sticky board number and feel reassured, right up until the hive fell apart. If you're going to test, do a real sugar roll or alcohol wash where you sample a known number of bees. That's a real measurement. The rest is guessing. And let me be honest about what's genuinely debated, because I won't oversell any of this to you. The exact treatment threshold, whether it's 2% or 3%, You'll hear different reputable people say slightly different things, and it depends on the time of year and where you live. The precise number is not gospel, but the principle is rock solid. Low mites in fall means your winter bees have a chance, and high mites in fall means they don't. Nobody serious argues with that anymore. There's also honest debate about how you treat once you find a problem, and that's a whole subject of its own. The organic acids like oxalic and formic, the thymol products, the timing, whether there's capped brood present. I'm not going to rush through treatments here and do them badly. What I want burned into your mind today is the counting, because you cannot make a single good decision about treating until you know your number. Treating blind on a calendar without ever counting is how mites build resistance and how good people waste money and still lose bees. You test, then you decide. One more honest word. Some beekeepers are chasing treatment-free, breeding for mite-resistant bees, and I respect that goal. It's probably where the long-term answer lies. Bees like the ones showing that mite-biting and hygienic behavior, the kind of resistance Dr. Thomas Seeley has documented in wild colonies up in the Arnott Forest. That's real and it's hopeful. But here's the thing. Even if you're going treatment-free, you test more, not less. Because the only way you know whether your resistant stock is actually working is by counting the mites. The test isn't the enemy of treatment-free beekeeping. It's the foundation of it. So let me pull this all back together for you, because I want you to walk away and actually do this. The varroa mite is the thing most likely to kill your colony. It feeds on the fat body, the very organ your bees need to survive winter. Its numbers climb invisibly all summer and peak in the fall, right when your colony is raising the long-lived winter bees that are its only lifeboat through the cold, and your eyes cannot see it coming. A colony can look magnificent in October and be dead by February, hollowed out from the inside. The $1 test, a jar, a piece of screen, and some powdered sugar, or a little alcohol if you want the honest, accurate number, cuts through all of that. Half a cup of nurse bees, about 300 of them, count the mites. Do the percentage. Under 2% going into fall, you're in good shape. 3% you treat. Higher than that, you act now, because the clock is running. Test your strong hives, not just your weak ones. Test more than once. Don't trust a sticky board to do a real test job. And don't ever look at a big, beautiful hive in September and tell yourself it's too healthy to bother checking. That's the exact hive I lost, and I don't want you to lose yours. You spend real money on your bees. You spend real hours, you care about them, or you wouldn't be here listening to an old beekeeper talk about mites for 20 minutes. So give them the 20 minutes and the dollar it takes to actually know. It is the highest value thing you will do for your colonies all year. Nothing else even comes close. Most beekeepers skip this test. That's precisely why most beekeepers lose hives they didn't have to lose. Don't be most beekeepers. Be the one who counts. Get yourself a jar and a bit of screen before the season gets away from you, and make the test a habit. Same as checking your stores. Same as watching your queen. Your bees can't tell you what's happening in those capped cells, but the mites in the bottom of that jar will tell you everything, if you're willing to look. Stick around. I've got a lot more to show you about getting these colonies through the year alive. Take care of yourself and take care of those bees.